Good morning. I think we're live now. So, Tet, I'm going to throw over to you to start us all off.
Terrific. Pleasure's mine. Look, my name's Kofi. I'm a director and co-founder of Journolink, working journalist with about 30, 40 years experience in the field. And what I and Peter are going to do today is to give you a sense of the two sides of the business coin. I'm the side that deals with journalists. That's because I'm a working journalist. Peter's going to tell you how it looks to do PR from the standpoint of a businessman. And together, we hope we're going to paint the two sides of the coin that give you a pretty rounded picture of PR and how you can do it for yourself. It's not complicated. Peter?
Yeah, so I'm the person who used to get interviewed actually quite a lot by Tet, as one of the journalists who used to interview me when I was fronting for one of the big high street banks in the last financial crisis. And what's really interesting, something that I found out when I was doing it, is that the viewpoint you have as somebody being interviewed as a business trying to get your message over and trying to get your press release, your article in the newspaper, the way we look at it is different from the way that the journalist looks at it. So as Tet says, what we're going to try and do today for you is pull together both sides of that equation, how you as a business can get your brand out there in the media, and then share with you the viewpoint from the journalist side as well. So Tet, you start off by saying where your thinking is from a journalist, and then I'll come with how I look at it from the business side.
Okay, let's get the yawning part out of the way. What is PR? PR is basically a way of building mutually beneficial relationships between you and your clients. Yeah. And it's a strategic process. Now, the two words I want you to take away out of this are relationships. PR is nothing but building relationships. And the second thing is that it's strategic. PR isn't something you wake up in the morning and think, "Ooh, fancy doing a bit of this and let me go and get it done." It means you have to plan it through. And one of the first things that I hear from businesses is, what am I going to plan? What am I going to say? And so on and so forth. And I tell everybody who's coming to me as a journalist that if you're a business, you've got loads of stories to tell. You've just got to know where to look. First of all, most businesses think their brand is the widget, the service, the product, the app, whatever it is that they're selling. Their brand is a lot more than that. Every business actually has four brands. The first is your consumer brand, i.e., the image that you're putting across to people who are the end users of your product. Okay. The second is what we call the financial brand, i.e., the sort of news that you want to tell people who might become funders, investors, people who buy your business if you're thinking about an exit strategy or whatever. The third is what we call your social brand, i.e., the things you do in your local community. Finally, there is what we call your employer or employee brand. That is the personalities behind the business. If you think about it, between these four aspects of your business, think of it like the old elephant. Somebody saw it, he said, "Well, it looks like a long rope." That's because he saw the trunk. Somebody saw it, he said, "Well, it looks like a tree trunk." That's because he saw the leg. Somebody saw it, he thought, "Well, it looks like a wall." That's because he felt its belly. Your business is multifaceted, and because of that, you have so much to engage a person like me, and I can't make a living without you. Peter?
Yeah, that last point there, you can't make a living without them, is a really, really important thing for any business that's going to try and get into the media, trying to get into the newspapers or on the telly or on the radio. A lot of people think that PR is just sort of free and the journalists will write whatever you want them to write or whatever you want them to say. That's not true. Tet's just sort of outlined how he thinks as a journalist and the stories he's looking for, but it is his living. All right. So from a business side, it's additionality for us. It's helpful in the marketing and that all that sort of thing. But for the journalist, if they haven't got good stories coming through, they're out of a job. So, it is their living. So see yourself very much as helping the journalist to create good stories, create good broadcast to help them survive in their jobs. One phrase that resonates with me really, really strongly, and it took me quite a while to work this out, that PR is not free, right? You pay for advertising, you pay for your emails, things like that. PR is paid for PR. So always have in your mind that there is a cost to you doing this. Now, this might not be you writing a big check for your advertising, but you've got to think it's mental cost. This is, you've got to think about how you are going to help this guy create a good story. There are three things that I think about as a business when I'm trying to get my story out there. So Tet's given you the sort of journalist, where the journalist head is, and the four perspectives he has. The three things I think about as a business are, what's the story? And that's really important in the context of those four headings that Tet's just talked about, all different sides of your business. I'll come back to that. What's your story? When's the right timing? And who are the right journalists for you to get this thing in front of? That's how you're going to get your PR done. So, don't be scared of it. You're working with the journalist to create a decent story and decent broadcast. But the critical thing to start with is, what's that story? And so many businesses think that the only thing that's important about the story they want to put out is something about their brand. Now, that's not necessarily the case. It could be a lot of things. It could be about you. I mean, I found myself about 5 months ago with a double page spread in the Telegraph. And it was nothing to do with Journolink as such. It was more somebody who's retired the first time round, put a load of money into a business and built a business. That was the story that the Telegraph wanted. Now, it's nothing about Journolink. It was just, there was a personal thing about me. It was one of the personalities of the business. That was the story they wanted. So first thing to think about here is the story. What is it that is going to create the news that the journalist will be interested in, and how are they going to find out what are the good things about that story that they're looking for? So I'm going to pass over to Tet now as the journalist. If I'm putting a story together, what is it that's going to capture your attention about that story to make you use it and put it in front of your readers and your viewers?
Okay. When you're talking about stories, think about storytelling. Nobody wants to get bored by you holding forth, okay? But every story has a hero. Every story has a hero who faces a challenge. Every story has a hero going through a bit of a struggle to overcome the challenge. And every great story has insights that the hero learned from the story. So that's storytelling. We often say that PR is earned coverage. With an ad, you can pay for what you want and they'll repeat your words verbatim. The person who's reading the ad knows, well, you paid for it. They are duty bound to print every single word that you say as you said it. But if somebody prints your story, they are endorsing you, and your levels of credibility, because you earned that coverage by the quality of your story, goes through the roof. Yeah. So using those four aspects of your brand, whether it's your social brand, your consumer brand, your financial brand, or your employer brand, put these stories together. I got to tell you this. I'm in the business of being read, retweeted, and shared. If you give me something that is worth retweeting and sharing, you made my day. Not only have you made my day, I will keep coming back to you for more and more and more. Okay? So the important thing is that you give me something which is newsworthy. Now, what newsworthy looks like varies from situation to situation. Put another way, I can say that there are, in my world, there are about three types of business story that come up. There's the news story. You've invented something new. You've discovered something new. You've launched something new. Put it out there. Especially if people have a salient problem relating to the problem that your product solves, it's a story in its own right. That's news. Another kind of story is what's called a feature story. A feature story is the sort of story which gives people insight into a problem that we all share, a worry that we all have. So, if, for example, during COVID, you find a way of making your office super efficient, it doesn't matter the fact that you actually make clothing for people. The story is that you have created a working environment that works for everybody. Do you think I won't print that? I will go for it like anything, and I will be the person with the scoop on the new insights on how to keep a working place clean. Think laterally. You will have earned that coverage. Now, can you imagine me doing that story without mentioning who the founder is, what their brand is, what market they work in, or whatever? And it is within those contexts that the best kind of earned coverage comes. So that's the feature which gives people insight into something that we all want a solution for. The final story, is the one that you'll probably be most familiar with, is the product story. So a product story is not just here's the widget, it costs XYZ pounds, and you can buy it from here. If I may make so bold, my friends, it's the last thing I want to know. I really am not honestly, as a journo, I am not your salesman. Your salesman does that sort of thing. I'm in the business of curating and sharing news. Okay. So when it's a product story, I need to know what you went through to create that product. There's a fantastic, the story is worth telling. Those of you who've ever lived in London, a certain malt liquor from America called Jack Daniels. They got 10 or 15 ads and they're laid out on the underground. Each one picks the most obscure aspect of their product. Could be the oak barrels that the things are entrenched in. It could be the fact that the guy who watches the oak barrels as the whiskey drips through, as the bourbon drips through, does nothing but whittle away at old sticks and so on. But they tell this amazing story around it. By the time you're halfway through reading this copy, okay, you're already kind of half reading the material in with a southern drawl. Once I didn't finish the story before the tube train came along, I was actually angry. For a moment, I thought, let me miss this train and finish the end of the story. But I'm just using that as an example of what a good product story is. Talk about the value proposition, talk about the needs that you fulfill. It's interesting. At the end, they will have got a really powerful snapshot of what that new product you're launching is, or what that new product you've developed is. But make it real. Peter?
So three things I'm picking out of this. The first one is really poignant that you just having given that story there about Jack Daniels. There is a great example of get your story right, whatever that story is about, and there'll be a reference to your brand in there, because what you're trying to do is get your brand, your business name covered in a newspaper article or on broadcast. That's what you're trying to do, get your brand name known, because it's fairly well recognized that it takes 13 14 times for somebody to see your brand name before they actually take any notice of it. So what you're trying to do, number one objective in all of this, is get your brand name in that newspaper. First point. Second thing I'm going to pick out from what Tess just said is the word endorsement. And I learned pretty early on in my interviewing career that whatever I said, nobody believed. So, and that actually is encapsulated by advertising as well. More and more now, the amount of money people spend on advertising, people don't believe it. What we are all into is reviews. Whenever we buy anything, the research came out a couple of weeks ago, funnily enough, that said 97% of us now buy based on reviews. And that's been driven a lot of the time by the pandemic that we've been in, that we've been buying stuff through Amazon and places like that. We always look for reviews. What that's about is somebody else other than the product manufacturer saying something about that product, that business, that person, whatever it is. So you're reaching out for someone who is trusted and independent to say something good about your business brand. So number one, you're trying to get your brand covered. That's important. Second thing you're trying to do is get somebody else who's trusted to say something good about your brand. That's the journalist. And you can't pay for that. You cannot pay for that. That's worth about 5 times what you would spend on a standard advert. Then the third thing to pick up on here is the story that you're putting through. And Tech went through 3 of those stories, one being your news, one being the feature, one being the product. And I found, again, in my interviewing career, as soon as I started trying to profile the brand that I was representing, the journalist absolutely turned off. And I can tell you, if you're ever lucky enough to get an interview on the BBC, you mention your brand more than once and they'll cut you off. They'll close the interview down. They're not in the business of giving you free advertising. So you've got to be pretty cute about this, right? You've got to try and get your story over there that meets their need. The 2 things I always think about with an interview is, this is my 5 minutes of fame. This is my newspaper article of fame, but I'm also the journalist's pimp. It's my job to give them the good story. So trying to get a product story out there with, we've got a sale next Thursday, there's 10% off everything, we've got an event, we've got a drinks evening, forget it. You will not get those things picked up by journalists. The 2 things that they're really after are that news article and the feature article. Those 2 need not be about your business product. It's about the story. It's about somebody who put some money in a business after they'd retired. It's about how you've got your office straight. It's about how you employ interns. It's about how you, as a new start entrepreneur, used government funding to get where you're at. It's those stories are the ones that are really, really valuable. So concentrate on, I've got to get my brand name out there, but I'm not going to do it by way of trying to get free advertising for my brand. I need this independent, trusted person to be writing about my brand. Therefore, let me try and help them get the story and do everything I can to give them good coverage and good broadcast. And thirdly, think about that story. Think about, is it a news article and is it a feature? And the one test I used to have in that was, anything I wanted to put out in the media, I used to show to my 12-year-old son and say, what do you think about that? And if the response I got from him was, I just don't care, well, neither would the journalist. If he sort of read to the end of it, I knew I was on a winner. So test it before you put it to the journalist. Test it with someone you trust. And if it's not got real good legs, if it's not news or it's not a good feature, and if they wouldn't spend money to buy a newspaper to read it, then it's probably not going to be taken by the journalist. So brand, trusted person that you're working with, and good story is the way that you've got a good chance of hooking the journalist. Tell me about the structure of a press release that you might get though, Ted. What's important? Do you spend a lot of time looking at the headline here? Or do you read the article fully before you decide what you want to cover? Or how do you do it? What are the tips that you can give us to, be the one that you pick out of those 100 emails you get every day?
What everybody's got to remember is that while it's the one press release you're sending that day, the journalist has seen upwards of 60. Okay. And secondly, there's another thing about journalists' lives is that every journalist, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Jeremy Paxman or the most recent graduate from journalism school, time poor. We just don't have enough time in the day. So every journalist has a way of sifting through the material that they get. The first thing I look for is a headline. It can be informative, it can be humorous, it can be eye-catching, but whatever it is, you have got to make an impact, and it has to be snappy. If I read, there are many emails that don't pass that don't pass the title test. So write your headline last on the piece. Make sure that the headline is the best way of getting attention for the subject matter in the piece. And the reason I say to write it last is that there is another thing personally, and like many of my colleagues, we can't stand, is to be led up under false pretenses. So if you write your headline last, you know that it's reflecting what's in the copy. Please don't promise me something and not pay it off with the content in the press release. That's not nice. Okay. So the first thing is a headline. Then, secondly, I will read from the top down. So I love to see in the first paragraph the 4 W's and the 1 H. Who, where, what, why, when. 5 W's. 1 H is how. If I get that, I know where I'm going. It'll establish or disestablish my interest straight away. So you need to get to the point. But then overall, what I most dislike in press releases is the one that's the Encyclopedia Britannica, the one that tells me about the meaning of life, how it started, where it's going to go, and where it's likely to end up. I want a press release to have a focus, a big idea that it's putting forward. If I'm hooked with the big idea, even if I don't want to write about that big idea, you could paint a picture in my head. I could pick up that press release, come back to you, and change the angle slightly, whatever the case, you got me. And this is so important because it's related to something that I get asked about quite a lot, which is that, when people approach journalists and so on and so forth, they're nervous. You've got nothing to be nervous about. Journalists are just like anybody else. If they don't pick up your email or your press release the first time round, don't worry. They're all time poor. It takes a while to connect with the media, but once you connect, you're in. And here is the sweet spot about engaging with people through sending press releases. Once I connect with you and I print your story, what do you think all my competitors out there are doing? I guarantee you, they spend a good 40 to 60% of their time reading their other competitors' stories. And they'll pick up a story and they can move it on. They can come at it from a different angle or whatever. So you don't need to connect with every journalist. All you need to do is to connect with a few journalists who understand your stuff. They will pimp your product for you. Then other people will ring up. I remember once I did a story about something that was brewing in America. In those days, I was a pundit. On the way back from the studio in the car, I got calls from 2 TV stations on 1 radio station. Why? They've been watching me on their monitors in the feed. That's exactly how journalism works. So actually, over the next 24 hours, I was doing more and more broadcast about that particular subject. That's how PR works. Don't worry about not getting to every journalist and its stock. Get to the journalists that are really relevant for you. They'll do the work. Other journalists will pick up their work. And before you know it, you'll see that your news is going around everywhere.
Let me just pick up on that headline side. So Ted said the first thing he looks at is the headline. And I think I've learned that as well, that if you get a headline right, you're halfway there to capturing the journalist's interest. If you're looking for regional coverage, make sure you cover that particular region in the headline. So if you're looking for, if you're based in Sunderland and you start it out as Sunderland business, then you're going to get the eyeballs of the Sunderland journalist and the local Northeast journalist. If you're in Gateshead, if you're in Newcastle, wherever you are, put that in your headline, so you've got that regionalized piece on there. Then you've got the regional journalist. If it's a national story you want, then you don't need that. You just go in with what that's about. So headline, really, really important. Got to be a bit provocative. It's got to hook the journalist's eye. But as Tet said, don't put a headline out that has nothing to do with the story. So headline important. One other thing to think about now, as we're sort of moving more and more into the digital world, journalists, I think Tet had endorsed this, you pick it up off your mobile. So think how many characters there are that you can get on the headline of a mobile as the sort of email headline. And you get about 35, 40 characters, something like that. So you've got to try and squash your headline into, or the main meat of the headline at the beginning into those sort of 35, 40 characters. Think about that, because that's how the journalist will.
Is that me? Hello? Hi. Well, look, if you can hear me, I think we may have lost a signal from Peter. So let me carry on for a moment while Peter's away, while we're trying to get him back into the studio. When you're getting your PR sorted out for your company, there's something that comes up about your audience. Is that, right at the top, I said that PR is a strategic communications process for enhancing mutual understanding between you and your clients. And that means that what you do has got to be planned, but planned for what? It's so important that you know who your audience is. You must understand who they are, back to front, mirror image, upside down, and you should be able to do this. If I woke you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, the way to define who your audience is to give them personas. Literally, you got to know the kind of clothes they like to wear, the kind of jobs they do, the kind of places they might live at, the kind of homes they might live in, the kind of pastimes that they may have. And it seems quite daunting at first, but it's quite important for you to know these things, because if you don't know who your client or your customer or your market looks like, it's very difficult to know how to build a relationship with them. I mean, the first part of building any relationship is getting to know the person that you're going to be building the relationship with. Second thing that defines our audiences is their demographic, the attitudes, beliefs, and behavior of a person who is a teen, a millennial, a Generation Xer, or whoever, is dramatically different. I see it on my board here at Journolink. Some of us are very young. Some of us, should we say older? That works for me. Some of us are a bit older. And the difference in attitude, belief, and behavior, just based on those demographic facts, is really quite significant. Also, another thing that defines the kind of audiences that you're going to is their location, where they live, how they live. And finally, what I like to look at a lot is the psychographics of your audiences. Now, If you know who these people are, you will know how to get their attention. If you know how to get their attention, I want you. I want your stories, and I will keep printing your stories or broadcasting your stories because I know that you're connected to your audience. So, one of the ways of influencing me is for you to know the audience that you're going to. Because when your communications come through, whether it's a press release or I see something on your Facebook page, or I see your Instagram live, or I see your tweets, I can tell. I get a sense. And of course, every journalist's mission is to be shared, read, broadcast, tweeted, and so on, clicked on. So that's how it is. It's so important, as a businessman, for you to know the nature of your audience. And Peter's come back,
And
and he's on the right side. Now I'm on the left, so I mustn't
that's a
lean over that
journalist's
way.
nightmare when they lose the connection with the interviewee. That's the nightmare. So apologies for the failure of the connection. Ted, can I
No,
just pick
Peter,
up?
what you missed was that I've just been talking about about clients knowing who their clients and who their customers are, so that they know how to get their attention.
Well, one of the things I was going to come on to, actually, I think when I just lost the connection, was the three things that I look at. One being the story, then the two things that Ted had picked up actually in the piece he was talking through, which was how do you get that right journalist? How do you pick up the right journalists? And then the second thing I was going to pick up with the timing, as when the right time to pick up those journalists really is. So on the right journalists, the way that I always looked at this is, look, I've two or three ways of doing this. I can go down to the local news agent and I can look through the sort of list of the journals that I want to be in, and I can capture the details of the journalist, editor at, info at, whatever it is, make my own list and send emails out to them. The second thing I can do is actually buy a list of the journalists, and I can go and do that. And there are the ways you can do that. You can do that through Journolink. Then the third thing you can do is actually rely on somebody else, a platform like we do in Journolink, where we will do the distribution for you. So getting the right journalist is really important. And, don't stress too much about that. We can do that for you, and there are systems that do that. Getting the timing right is really important as well. So your story's great, but get the timing right. And the best time I found to get into the journalists' columns is when they are writing the story. So you get media requests coming from the actual journalists for you to contribute to their story. We call those editorial requests or media requests, something like that. And again, that's something that we can help you with in Journolink. That's the best possible time to get to a journalist when they're desperate for a business to make some comment about the story that they're running. The other piece on the timing is when you want to put something out. We talked about the story, we talked about feature, we talked about news. When you want to get that news out, that's your timing rather than the journalist's timing. So you've got to try and work out what's going to be trending in the news at that time, so that when you put your headline out, when you put your story out, a journalist like Ted actually picks up and says, this is relevant to right now. Believe it or not, we're sitting here start of October, mid-October, and already we now have journalists compiling their Christmas gift guides and asking for businesses to contribute ideas about Christmas gifts now. And those columns will appear in the beginning of December, but they're looking for the story now. So you've got to think about when the right timing is, and get your story aligned to timing. So it's story, timing, and the right journalists. I think we've got about 5 minutes to go, Ted. If anybody's got any questions, by all means, put those through now, or you can feed them back to the organisers, and we're very happy to pick up any questions and come back to you afterwards on them. But as we sort of come to an end, the piece I'd like just to highlight is there are plenty of people out there who will help you with your PR. I know when I started doing it, it's a bit of a dark art, and it's something that's often quite scary, and you think it's very expensive. To a journalist, it's their day-to-day meat and drink, but to a business, it's actually quite hard to think about how am I going to do that, and it's a bit scary. People are there to help you do that, and it is something that's important as part of your marketing to be doing. So look at a platform like Journolink. There's others out there as well, but Journolink is a very good platform. I think the organizers will put the details up on the screen as we close. So feel free to have a look at the platform that we run. It's there to help you, and you will find the people that are around you as your business advisors. They will help you as well. It's not an expensive thing to do. It's a very easy thing to do if you get the right platform, and it can be hugely valuable to you as part of your outreach to get your brand recognized. So, from my perspective, when I was doing it a lot, using a journalist to give you an independent third-party endorsement is hugely valuable and something that you can't pay for. So very much worth doing. Tet, is that how you look at it as a journalist as well? Or do you look at it more as being, this is my job and I just need people to help me?
See, I mean, the thing is, journalists will never tell you this, but every person gets into journalism for a reason. Everyone has their little mission going on behind everything they do for their daily bread every day. And every journalist wants to influence the environment in one way or another. And here's the thing, there is such diversity amongst journalists that there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 journalists who are perfect for you, whose work, whose ethos, whose purpose, and everything else syncs perfectly with yours. You just got to find them. See, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that when it comes to media, it's important that you don't have any fear of journalists. Look, unless you're a special political advisor, unless you own a huge amount of stock in a Fortune 500 company, such that every word you say people are hanging on to influence the stock market, most journalists are in this to help and support you. Journalists aren't in this to make you look poor or bad. Journalists are in this to support you. And once you build that relationship with the journalist, it just continues. It rolls on to other people, and the snowball gets wider and wider and wider. So please feel at ease when you're trying to get in touch with a journalist. Have no fear, because you're not the sort of person who is considered a hostile interview. You are the sort of person who was considered, in the main, an arms round the shoulder, let's support you sort of interview. So feel at ease and have at it.
Yeah, I'm just really going to really endorse that comment, Ted. You as the business are not under any pressure during any interview, or whether you get an interview for journalism, for print,
on me.
You're not under pressure. It's on the journalist. It's the journalist's job. What you're trying to do is get your brand recognized. And I promise you, and this is from personal experience, whatever you do, whether it's print or whether it's broadcast, whatever it is, everyone around you will tell you, you did great. Even if you made a complete mess of it, I promise you, they will still tell you, you did great. If the journalist gets it wrong, it's the journalist that loses their job. So the pressure's on them, not on you. So, when it comes to PR, just go and enjoy it. I just saw a question pop up actually a little while ago from Steve, I think, saying he'd missed some of the session here. I think it is recorded, and I'm sure the organisers will tell us that it can be seen again if you want to see it again. But if you want to look more at Journolink, please do have a look at the Journolink website, which is www.journolink.com. And if you have any questions, then come to us at support@Journolink, and we'll be more than happy to help you and steer you. And have a look at the platform. You can register on Journolink, have a look at it, play around with it without paying any money to start.
We've got lots of videos and tips and tricks and stuff on there as well.
So please go and have a look at it, and please do use it. And we will look forward to helping you with your PR as you go forward and getting your brand in your newspapers, and hopefully see you on the television and on the radio. It's well worth doing. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks very much indeed.
Bye.